you can never please. If she's in a house with 16 bathrooms, the next one she's thinking about has got to have 23 bathrooms. He looks so unhappy, so drained, and as if the world is coming to an end. And yet the actual monarchy is have no importance to them. So it's very hypocritical.
It started with a smile. A calm, composed smile from a woman who spent decades decoding royal secrets. But what followed next wasn't a polite commentary or another rehash of royal gossip. It was a detonation. On live television, royal biographer Angela Levin looked straight into the camera and asked the one question no royal commentator had dared to say out loud, not whispered in tabloids, not hinted at in royal circles, a direct challenge to the very bloodline of Harry and Meghan's children. This wasn't about PR blunders, awkward documentaries, or another tone-deaf podcast. Angela didn't drop a spicy anecdote or a vague insinuation. She questioned the legitimacy, the constitutional, documented, verifiable legitimacy of Archie and Lilibet's birth. And just like that, decades of carefully curated royal image control started to unravel. She didn't shout, she didn't dramatize, she didn't need to. The weight of her words hit like a royal earthquake. For the first time in modern royal history, someone was publicly challenging whether the children of a prince were even qualified to be in the line of succession. The palace didn't respond. The media went into overdrive. And Harry? He didn't just get angry, he went to war. Because if what Angela Levin hinted at is true, if there's no ironclad documentation, no clear medical record, no official step-by-step protocol followed, then this isn't just a scandal. It's a constitutional crisis, and it gets worse. What started as a single question has now spiraled into an investigation that threatens everything Harry and Meghan have built. Their children's titles, their brand, their contracts, their future. All of it hinges on one thing: proof. Not pictures, not stories, not staged magazine shoots. Real, undeniable royal documentation. And right now, that doesn't seem to exist. This is the story of how one televised question cracked open a secret the palace hoped would never surface. And what happens next could shake the monarchy to its core. For centuries, the royal family has treated one ritual as sacred: the royal birth protocol. Not just tradition, but constitutionally mandated steps designed to protect the monarchy's most precious asset, legitimacy. And for every royal child born into that lineage, the rules have never wavered until now. Angela Levin didn't dance around it. She didn't couch her words in soft phrasing or vague insinuations. She asked, point blank, why Prince Harry and Meghan Markle ignored every single element of the royal birth protocol when Archie and Lilibet were born. No signed medical bulletins, no hospital steps photos, no attending physicians are giving public updates, no transparent timelines, no official witnesses, no verifiable proof. And here's the part that stopped everyone cold. These aren't just quaint ceremonies or dusty old customs. These are legal and constitutional requirements that ensure the monarchy's line of succession is airtight. Every monarch, every heir, every spare has been born into that process with clarity and documentation. And suddenly, when it came to Harry and Meghan's children, the playbook vanished. For those outside the palace walls, this might seem like overkill. After all, modern families don't typically deliver babies with official observers and signed declarations. But the British monarchy isn't just a family. It's a constitutional institution. Every birth must be proven, certified, and presented publicly. Not for vanity, not for show, but to eliminate any question of authenticity. If there's even the hint of a discrepancy, the ripple effect isn't just personal, it's political, it's historic. And that's what Angela was driving at. Why were Harry and Meghan the only senior royals in modern history to completely bypass these ironclad steps? Why were their children born in secrecy, introduced with stylized photo shoots instead of verified medical documents? Why did they shut down the very protocols that Queen Elizabeth, Princess Diana, and even Kate Middleton followed without hesitation? This wasn't a minor oversight. This was a full-scale departure from centuries of precedent, and Angela knew it. When she asked the question live on television, it wasn't just to spark controversy, it was to force accountability. Because if those protocols weren't followed and no official documentation exists, then technically and constitutionally, those children may not even be recognized as legitimate royal heirs. The implications are staggering, and the silence that followed her question, deafening. Reporters froze, commentators hesitated, and back in Montecito, Prince Harry reportedly erupted. But why such an extreme reaction to a simple question? The answer is buried in what happened next, and it exposes a timeline so twisted, so murky, it makes Angela's question impossible to ignore. The deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. From the moment Meghan Markle's first pregnancy was announced, something felt off. The usual royal fanfare was there, but the details were strangely elusive. Then came the photos. blurry, distant, inconsistent. Baby bumps that seem to vanish one week and balloon the next. Clothes chosen to conceal instead of highlight. Angles too perfect. Lighting is too precise. For a couple who once accused the royal family of hiding the truth, Meghan and Harry were suddenly experts at hiding the details. Traditionally, royal pregnancies are a matter of national interest, documented with care, covered by trusted press, and confirmed by official statements at every step. The public doesn't just expect transparency. The monarchy requires it. It's how trust is preserved. But with the Sussexes, the transparency was replaced with precision-controlled secrecy. Gone were the hospital steps. Gone were the signed statements from royal doctors. Gone was the proud unveiling of a future heir by the parents themselves. In its place, highly curated, post-produced, magazine-style images released on their terms, and only after the fact. And then the timelines started to crumble. Reports of Meghan going into labor clashed with the time of birth announced hours later. Rumors swirled about where Archie was really born. Portland Hospital? A private residence? The palace gave vague statements, but the details kept shifting. Questions were met with silence. Journalists who pressed too hard found themselves cut off. By the time Lilibet's birth was announced, things got even murkier. For a family so invested in privacy, the Sussexes had somehow managed to trademark their daughter's name within days of the announcement, but hadn't released so much as a single credible hospital record. Once again, the public was asked to just believe them. No documentation, no witness, no public presentation, just trust. And that's when the online sleuth stepped in. Across social media, clips began circulating. Side-by-side comparisons of Meghan's bump from one week to the next, freeze frames, angle analyses, timestamp breakdowns. Commenters noticed patterns, inconsistencies, and unexplained absences. A swelling wave of suspicion began to grow, powered not by tabloids, but by the very public that once embraced them. Users asked, why did the Sussexes go to such lengths to avoid transparency? More unsettling still were the staged photos that replaced the missing hospital moments. Rather than the timeless step photo every royal mother before her had taken, Meghan's images were tightly composed, art-directed, and devoid of context. No location, no medical team, no press, just a soft lens, a distant gaze, and a baby wrapped in symbolism rather than certainty. And behind all of it, silence. No royal doctors signed off on the births. No palace medical team issued official statements. No one from the hospital publicly confirmed anything. And the Sussexes? They never corrected the confusion, never clarified the location, never showed paperwork. They leaned into the mystery, which begs the question, why? If there's nothing to hide, why hide everything? Angela Levin didn't speculate wildly. She simply held up the facts and asked what millions were already thinking. And the truth is, when you line up the photos, the silence, and the changing timelines, it doesn't just feel strange. It feels deliberate. And when you challenge royal legitimacy, even subtly, you aren't just dealing with PR fallout. You're dealing with something far more serious. Something that sends seasoned courtiers into damage control and constitutional experts into emergency briefings. But Angela wasn't done. Her question had barely landed before she set the next trap. One that named names, pointed fingers, and dragged Harry into a situation no legal team could fix without exposing everything. Angela Levin knew exactly what she was doing. Her first question had cracked the door open. But what came next? That wasn't a question. It was a calculated strike. And it changed everything. Just days after her initial televised revelation sent Buckingham Palace into a silent lockdown and Montecito into frantic damage control, Angela returned to the spotlight. Calm, composed, dangerous. This time, she didn't just raise eyebrows. She dropped names. Live on air, in front of millions, Angela casually mentioned the name of the specific legal firm allegedly orchestrating Prince Harry's behind-the-scenes effort to shut the controversy down. No vague accusations, no legalese, just one chilling sentence delivered with surgical precision. Sources close to the palace confirm Harry's legal strategy is being coordinated through, and then she said it, a real firm, a traceable name, a breadcrumb trail no one in Harry's team wanted exposed. And that's when the trap snapped shut. Because Angela hadn't made an accusation, she'd issued a dare. If Harry wanted to prove her wrong, he'd have to acknowledge the very thing he'd worked desperately to keep secret. His legal machine, his reputation handlers, his behind-closed-doors maneuvering, all of it would have to be revealed to disprove her, which meant dragging confidential documents into public light. And here's the genius of it. She never said she had the proof. She didn't have to. By naming the firm, she created a legal paradox. Harry could either, 1, stay silent and let the suspicion spread unchecked. 2, deny it and risk the press uncovering the very operation he was trying to suppress. 3, attack her and open the door to discovery, where he'd have to provide the receipts. It was a masterclass in tactical provocation. And the public? They ran with it. Social media detectives pulled records on the firm within minutes. Articles popped up overnight connecting the dots. Suddenly, it wasn't just about the birth protocols. It was about a cover-up. The story had evolved from, did they break tradition, to, are they hiding something far more serious? And Harry? He walked right into the trap. Instead of ignoring the storm, he responded like a man on fire. Cease and desist letters were drafted. Lawyers reached out to networks. Angry messages were leaked to friendly journalists. But with every move, the situation spiraled deeper. Because every threat, every pushback, validated Angela's claim. If there was nothing to hide, why so many threats? If Angela was lying, why not sue for libel? If the firm had no involvement, why not deny it outright? But Harry did none of that. He flailed. He panicked. And in doing so, he confirmed what Angela wanted the public to suspect all along. There was a secret campaign, and it wasn't going well. Legal experts began weighing in. PR analysts warned of a full-blown crisis. Even sympathetic media figures started asking the one question no Sussex supporter wanted to answer. Why not just release the documentation and end this? But it was too late. Angela had turned a media moment into a constitutional thunderstorm. And Harry? He'd unknowingly invited the entire British press to start sniffing through every inch of the timeline he thought was buried. And that's when the panic turned personal. That's when the breakdown began. It didn't take long. Within hours of Angela Levin's tactical bombshell, the cracks in Prince Harry's armor became impossible to ignore. What began as a controlled royal commentator's question had now snowballed into a public inferno. And Harry? He didn't just mishandle the response, he detonated it. The man who once stood in front of cameras with military precision and effortless charm was suddenly unrecognizable. According to sources close to Montecito, Harry wasn't just angry, he was unraveling. Furious messages were sent. Crisis calls lit up every hour. Legal threats were drafted so fast that his own advisors barely had time to proofread them. And while the public watched, one truth became impossible to miss. Prince Harry wasn't defending his children's privacy. He was fighting for control, and losing. Because instead of issuing a calm, factual response, one that could have diffused the rumors with simple documentation, Harry reached straight for the nuclear option, intimidation. Multiple UK and US media outlets began receiving formal warning letters from Harry's legal team. Cease and desist, defamation alerts, threats of litigation if Angela Levin's claims weren't buried immediately. Not just against her, but against anyone who dared echo the question she'd asked. But here's where it backfired, spectacularly. To the public, it looked like guilt, not power, not protection, panic. And in the court of public opinion, that's a deadly look. Because if you're innocent, you prove it. You show records, you release certificates, you clarify. But when you're cornered and all you do is threaten to sue, you've already lost the narrative. And Meghan? She was nowhere to be found. In the middle of Harry's most visible breakdown since the Oprah interview, his wife and alleged strategic partner stayed dead silent. No statement, no joint video, no damage control, just silence. Cold, calculating silence. While Harry lashed out and self-destructed, Meghan let him absorb every hit, alone. Insiders claimed she was working behind the scenes with their communications team, trying to salvage upcoming business partnerships and maintain her polished public image. But the optics told a different story. Harry was spiraling, and Meghan had quietly stepped away. For a couple that built their entire brand on unity, compassion, and family-first values, the divide was jarring. The once dynamic duo now looked fractured, disconnected, even opportunistic. Meanwhile, Angela Levin continued her media blitz, measured, methodical, and utterly untouched by Harry's tantrum. Her calm, in contrast to Harry's chaos, made headlines all on their own, and the public noticed. But what truly escalated the PR disaster wasn't Harry's legal overreach. It was what he didn't do. He didn't present hospital records. He didn't release signed medical documents. He didn't clarify the timeline or provide a single piece of evidence that could have ended the speculation in seconds. Instead, he played victim. And by doing so, he handed his critics the narrative on a silver platter. Even mainstream media, once hesitant to question the Sussexes, began quietly turning. Editorials appeared with cautious language like concerning lack of transparency and avoidable damage. Royal commentators, formerly sympathetic, now asked publicly why Harry was fueling a fire he could have easily extinguished with facts. And then came the worst blow of all. Complete silence from Buckingham Palace. No defense, no denial, not a single whisper of support from the monarchy. The same institution Harry had criticized for being cold and distant now let him face the storm, alone. The unspoken message? You started this, you handle it. Even former allies in the media began keeping their distance. Friends who once rushed to his defense were suddenly unavailable for comment. PR professionals called it a textbook implosion, self-inflicted and totally unnecessary. But what made Harry's meltdown truly dangerous wasn't just the optics or the backlash. It was what it revealed. this wasn't about protecting his family's privacy. It was about protecting the illusion. Because if even one part of Angela Levin's question turned out to be true, the entire Sussex brand, titles, status, Netflix deals, public sympathy, would collapse like a house of cards. And deep down, Harry knew it. That's why he reacted the way he did. Not like a prince, not like a father, but like a man watching his empire crumble and realizing he built it on secrets that couldn't survive daylight. At the heart of every royal title, every coronation, every 1,000-year-old tradition is one quiet, unbreakable truth. Bloodline matters. It's not about popularity. It's not about who gives the best speech or who wins the public's heart in a Netflix documentary. The British monarchy doesn't function on feelings. It runs on proof. Documented, verified, indisputable proof of succession. Without it, the entire system falls apart. And that's why Angela Levin's question hit like a sledgehammer. Because if Harry and Meghan skipped the birth protocols, not out of modern rebellion, but because they had something to hide, then this isn't just a PR scandal. It's a constitutional threat. One that cuts straight to the core of the monarchy's legitimacy, and the ripple effects, they're far bigger than anyone initially realized. See, when a royal baby is born, it isn't just an emotional event, it's a legal one. There are steps, signatures, timelines, a public record that proves, without doubt, that this child belongs in the royal line. From Queen Elizabeth down to baby George, every single royal child has passed through that same gauntlet of transparency, except Archie and Lilibet. No hospital steps photos, no signed doctor bulletins, no publicly documented attending physician, no clear confirmation of when, where, or how the births occurred. In the modern age, when even the most minor public figures post birth announcements with timestamps and hospital snaps, the complete absence of this for Harry and Meghan's children raises not just eyebrows, but constitutional red flags. And that's where the panic truly begins. Because according to royal constitutional experts, the question isn't just, were protocols followed? It's, do these children even qualify for succession if they weren't officially documented according to royal law? Yes, you read that right. This isn't tabloid fodder anymore. It's a legal question with monarchy-level consequences. The moment birth verification is compromised, so is the right to royal titles, the line of succession, and even the legitimacy of using those HRH designations abroad. And suddenly, everything Meghan and Harry built comes into question. Let's talk brass tacks. Their Netflix deal? Sold on the illusion of inside royal access. Their speaking gigs? Fueled by the cachet of royal lineage? Their book deals, business partnerships, and brand identity? All propped up by the belief that they're still part of the royal system, even if they stepped away from it. But if serious doubts begin to circle around the legitimacy of their children's birth documentation, if the palace, or worse, Parliament, ever quietly starts reviewing the evidence, everything collapses. Because without verifiable royal lineage, they're not the rogue prince and princess reclaiming their freedom. They're just another Hollywood couple with a title on life support. And the brutal irony? Harry and Meghan spent years attacking the palace for its lack of transparency. They demanded honesty, openness, proof. But when it came time to follow the exact same standards for their own children, they chose secrecy, control. And now they're the ones avoiding questions. It's the ultimate contradiction. And people are starting to notice. Inside royal circles, there are whispers, legal advisors, constitutional scholars. Even members of Parliament have started asking pointed, uncomfortable questions about how these titles were granted and whether they'll stand the test of legal scrutiny. And Harry knows it. That's why his reaction to Angela's question wasn't just emotional. It was existential. Because this isn't just about clearing up rumors or winning back public favor. This is about survival. If those titles go, so does everything they've built. The fame, the relevance, the future. They can't Netflix their way out of this. They can't sue their way out of this. Because bloodline, you either have it or you don't. And in the royal world, that's the one thing you can't fake. You could almost hear the breath being held at Buckingham Palace. As Angela Levin's bombshell ignited a media firestorm and Prince Harry spiraled publicly, there was one place that stayed unnervingly quiet, the palace itself. No rebuttals, no denials, no carefully worded statements offering support or clarification, not even a leaked source whispering a generic, "nothing to see here." Just nothing. And in the royal world, that kind of silence is louder than a scream. The monarchy is no stranger to crisis management. When the Queen's integrity was questioned during the aftermath of Diana's death, statements were crafted. When Prince Andrew's scandal exploded, the palace issued carefully phrased messages. Even during Harry and Meghan's explosive Oprah interview, there was at least a surface-level response. Recollections may vary, they said, a subtle surgical counter. But this time, not even that. Instead, Buckingham Palace executed the most chilling move in the royal playbook: strategic abandonment. Insiders began murmuring about a shift, an intentional choice not to protect Harry anymore. not because they believed Angela's claims, but because they understood what was coming. This wasn't a family matter. This was constitutional dynamite. And if the monarchy was to survive, it needed distance, urgently. That meant cutting Harry loose. Royal courtiers who once bent over backwards to smooth over his antics were suddenly on holiday. Palace insiders who'd always fed the media subtle defenses now refused comment. And reporters who tried to get clarity from royal sources were met with closed doors and cold stares. There were no leaks defending Harry's position, no anonymous quotes assuring the public that documents are being reviewed or records do exist. Nothing to suggest the palace even wanted to correct the speculation. And that in itself was devastating. Because for 1,000 years, the Crown has understood one thing better than any modern PR agency. When someone becomes a liability, you let them burn alone. That's exactly what was happening. Even senior palace correspondents, usually the first to douse fires with soft royal spin, began to shift their tone. They weren't just avoiding Harry's side of the story. They were subtly aligning with Angela's. Not because they loved her, many don't, but because they recognized something bigger. They saw which way the wind was blowing, and that wind, it was cold. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Harry's closest allies began disappearing from the conversation. Public figures who had once defended him now found reasons to step back. Political contacts who championed his causes suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Even Meghan's celebrity connections, always more aligned with Hollywood than heritage, began going quiet. Because when Buckingham Palace stops shielding you, it sends a signal. And that signal is global. This person is no longer protected. Worse still, Parliament started paying attention. Several MPs, without naming names, began raising concerns in private about the transparency of royal titles granted outside traditional protocols. A few even suggested that if proper documentation didn't exist for certain births, there might be cause for legislative review, quietly, behind the scenes, but with very real consequences. And yet, not a single royal stepped up to say, "We stand by Harry," not Charles, not William, not even the Queen's most senior staff. The door had closed. And what's more damning than the silence is what that silence allows. It gives room for speculation to grow, for the public to assume the worst, and for media empires to run wild with narratives that once would have been shut down in hours. In the absence of official support, Angela Levin became the authority. Her analysis, she's calm. Her refusal to back down suddenly carried more weight than anything Harry or Meghan could put out in a press release. And that shift, from royal family to rogue commentator, was symbolic of the exact power vacuum Harry had created for himself. He wanted independence. Now he had it. He wanted to stand alone. Now he was. But with no institution to buffer him, every word he spoke, every legal threat he issued, every panic-stricken move he made was now fully his to own. And Meghan, still silent, still calculating, still letting Harry take the punches while she watched from the wings, perhaps preparing her next move, perhaps preserving her image, or perhaps quietly realizing the palace would never come to their rescue again. Because when the Crown decides someone is no longer an asset, they become a cautionary tale. As Prince Harry raged, threatened legal action, and spiraled under the weight of Angela Levin's revelations, there was one question on everyone's lips. Where is Meghan? For a woman who once dominated headlines, coordinated press rollouts down to the minute, and stood shoulder to shoulder with Harry during their most high-profile battles, Meghan's absence was no accident. It was a strategy. Because while Harry was storming through crisis meetings and sending cease and desist letters to media outlets, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Calculated Optics, chose silence. She didn't issue a rebuttal. She didn't appear beside her husband in a defiant show of unity. She didn't even post a vague Instagram quote about truth or resilience. She vanished, and in doing so, she said more than any public statement ever could. Inside sources say she was working quietly with PR advisors and her high-level communications team, not to defend the birth protocol scandal, but to protect her brand from the fallout. Because make no mistake, this wasn't just about royal titles anymore. This was about the one thing Meghan values most: control of the narrative. Angela Levin had flipped the script. The fairy tale Meghan had spent years selling, the modern duchess, the empowered mother, the royal rebel, was now being dissected in real time. Her silence during Harry's unraveling wasn't apathy, it was self-preservation. And here's where it gets interesting. That silence didn't just protect her, it exposed something darker. Because as Harry took every punch, from public ridicule to media backlash, Meghan let him stand alone. The man who once stood up to the entire royal establishment for her, who abandoned family, status, and legacy in her name, now found himself the sole target of global scrutiny. And Meghan? She didn't lift a finger. There were no sources close to Meghan defending him. No planted stories remind the world of their shared love and unity. No comforting images were released to soften public perception. Instead, she allowed the press to speculate, to turn Harry into a man on the verge of collapse. And for some observers, it felt intentional. Was Meghan distancing herself from a sinking ship? Or was she simply preserving her long-term play, remaining clean, poised, and detached while the controversy scorched everything in Harry's path? Industry insiders began whispering about Meghan's increasing frustration behind the scenes, not with Angela Levin, but with Harry's handling of the crisis. According to reports, she felt his outbursts were making things worse, that the aggressive legal response lacked finesse, and that every public reaction only deepened the perception that they were hiding something. She had a different approach in mind: wait it out, control the message, and pivot quietly. Her team was said to be in overdrive, focusing not on defending the birth protocols, but on keeping her other ventures safe. Business partnerships, brand negotiations, upcoming media appearances, because if Harry's panic turned into a full-scale meltdown, she couldn't risk having her name entangled in the collapse. And that's when the shift became undeniable. For years, Harry and Meghan branded themselves as inseparable, a unified force against the establishment, two outsiders bound by love and defiance. But now, their PR tracks were diverging. Harry was reacting. Meghan was calculating. Harry was escalating. Meghan was vanishing. Behind palace walls, insiders took note. One former aide allegedly said, "She's letting him sink to see what she can salvage." Others described it more harshly. "She's protecting the product. He's become a liability." And it didn't go unnoticed by the public. Comment sections filled with questions. Why isn't Meghan saying anything? Is she leaving him out to dry? Where's the support now? Even longtime fans began to wonder, was this the beginning of a fracture? A branding pivot? Or the cold execution of a long-term media strategy? Because let's be clear, Meghan's silence wasn't passive, it was deliberate, and it allowed her to preserve the illusion of control while Harry was visibly losing his grip. It kept her distant from the birth legitimacy scandal, and it allowed her to gauge the damage, to him, to their brand, and to their standing with the public, before deciding her next move. In the end, it was a brutal contrast. Harry, the emotional royal, lashing out, drowning in legal threats. Meghan, the strategist, is cool, detached, and always 2 moves ahead. But that silence came at a price. Because as Meghan stayed hidden, as Harry bore the storm alone, the illusion of their unbreakable partnership began to crack. And for a couple who sold their marriage as a modern monarchy, that fracture was more revealing than any interview ever could be. Just when it seemed the firestorm might finally burn itself out, when Harry's breakdown had played out, Meghan had disappeared behind a wall of silence, and the palace had closed its doors. Angela Levin delivered one final blow. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, measured, and far more devastating than anyone expected. She looked directly into the camera, composed, confident, and said 6 words that stopped Montecito cold. "This is just the beginning." No shouting, no threats. Just a calm declaration that echoed like a warning shot across the Atlantic. And in that moment, everything changed. Because now the public knew Angela wasn't done, not even close. Insiders immediately began to speculate. What else was she holding back? Was there documentation, a witness, a confidential source? Rumors swirled that Angela had been sitting on evidence for years, waiting for the right moment to release it. Some claimed she had direct communication from royal aides who quietly raised concerns during Meghan's pregnancies. Others suggested she'd seen hospital records, or the lack thereof, that confirmed the worst fears about the Sussex children's official status. One royal correspondent put it bluntly, "If Angela has proof that the constitutional protocol was violated, we're not talking about a scandal, we're talking about disqualification." And that's when things began to move. Fast. Legal analysts were suddenly booked on primetime panels, not to talk about Harry's legal threats, but to examine the legitimacy of Archie and Lilibet's royal standing. They discussed laws dating back centuries, clauses buried deep in the Acts of Settlement, and whether Parliament might, in theory, have the power to strip royal titles if proof of proper birth documentation didn't exist. The conversation had shifted from celebrity gossip to constitutional crisis. But Angela didn't flinch. In fact, her influence grew. News networks that once treated her as a niche royal expert were now placing her front and center. Her words were quoted in every article, replayed on every broadcast. Her books surged in sales, and she knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't just a media tour, this was a strategy. Because while Harry and Meghan scrambled to control the optics, Angela had something much more powerful, the truth, or at least the perception of it, and that was enough. Meanwhile, back in Montecito, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Harry's team, once certain they could squash the narrative with legal pressure, had entered full crisis mode. Meetings dragged into the night. Advisors warned that any further escalation could trigger discovery, forcing the very documents they wanted to keep hidden into the public record. They had created a paradox. If they denied the allegations too forcefully, journalists and politicians alike would demand proof. But providing that proof meant releasing documentation they had refused to show for years. Birth records, hospital logs, attending physician signatures. all of it. And if any of it was incomplete, or worse, fabricated, the consequences would be catastrophic. And what about Meghan? Her silence became harder and harder to justify. The longer she stayed hidden, the more people began to speculate that she wasn't just staying out of the fire. She was waiting for Harry to burn. Public trust in their unity began to erode. Body language experts resurfaced old footage. Paparazzi scoured California for signs of solo outings. Headlines began whispering about cracks in the Sussex Foundation. And all the while, Angela Levin said, nothing more. She didn't need to. Her final words, "This is just the beginning," had opened the floodgates. Constitutional experts were now openly questioning whether the titles Prince and Princess Lilibet were legally sustainable. If these children were not born in accordance with royal tradition, and their births were not verified by royal doctors, could they even be considered legitimate heirs? The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, and global scandals, but never a legitimacy crisis surrounding a living prince's children. Never this. And then came the whispers no one saw coming. Angela might have more than just questions. She might have proof. Suddenly, this wasn't a story anymore. It was a countdown. Because if Angela truly possesses documents, insider testimony, or hidden details that confirm protocol violations, and if she chooses to release them, then the Sussex narrative collapses, not just in the media, but in history. This could redefine royal succession, strip titles, trigger investigations. It could render Archie and Lilibet footnotes instead of heirs. It could destroy Harry's final connection to the crown. And with it, everything he and Meghan have built. And that's why this isn't over. Not even close. This was never just about hospital photos, or missing documents, or a commentator speaking out of turn. This was about the one thing the monarchy cannot survive without: legitimacy. And when Angela Levin calmly asked that forbidden question on live television, she didn't just expose inconsistencies in Harry and Meghan's narrative. She exposed a fault line, one that runs directly beneath the crown itself. Because in the British monarchy, every title, every honor, every taxpayer-funded duty is built on one core principle: proven bloodline. No matter how much public opinion shifts, no matter how modern the firm tries to become, that single rule has never changed. And when that principle is challenged, especially from inside the royal circle, the consequences are nuclear. Angela didn't need screaming headlines or royal aides in tears. She let the facts speak. And the facts, they tell a story that doesn't line up. No witnesses. No verified locations. No official birth records have been publicly released. A timeline that flickers under scrutiny like a badly edited documentary. Photos that raise more questions than answers. But the real damage wasn't done by what Angela said. It was how Harry responded. Instead of releasing proof, he released lawyers. Instead of transparency, he doubled down on secrecy. Instead of calming the storm, he fueled it. And while he stumbled through legal landmines, Meghan stood back, watching, calculating, preserving what remained of her solo brand. The palace didn't lift a finger to protect him. Parliament started whispering. And now, the idea that Archie and Lilibet could be removed from the line of succession isn't some wild conspiracy. It's being quietly weighed by the very system that once crowned Harry a prince. If Angela has what she hints at, documents, sources, corroboration, then this isn't just a PR disaster. It's a constitutional reckoning. It means the Sussex children's titles could be stripped. It means Harry's public identity could be dismantled. It means Meghan's empire, built on the illusion of royal legitimacy, could collapse overnight. And in the end, that's the irony. The couple who claimed to flee the monarchy to protect their family may have done so without securing the one thing that truly mattered: proof. Angela Levin's final words still hang in the air. This is just the beginning. And if that's true, then Harry and Meghan aren't just facing media scrutiny. They're facing the potential undoing of everything they've fought to control. Because in the monarchy, you can walk away from your titles, but you can't walk away from the truth. And when the crown decides to respond, not with emotion, but with law, it doesn't issue statements, it changes history. And the children? They may one day learn that silence wasn't their protection, it was their undoing.